Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance. About a month ago, I lost my grandmother. She was 95 years old. She lived a full life, and she had the privilege of time, one that many people don't get. I also had the privilege of time with my grandparents. I was fortunate enough to have 3 full sets of grandparents, and I had relationships with all of them. I got to grow up with most of them, having all but one well into adulthood. The memories I have, I will cherish forever. The legacies they've left are gifts, as a piece of all of them has shaped me into who I am today. But having lost all but one grandmother now, I've realized that there are conversations I wish I had had when my grandparents were still alive, questions I wish I'd asked. I don't think that there are enough questions in the world to prepare you for losing somebody that you love. Still, though, the only way that our stories live on is if the people who care for us continue to tell them. Having been doing this podcast for almost 3 years now, many of us don't think that our stories are interesting enough to share. But life itself is a great adventure that needs no embellishment. So take the time to share your story and to listen to others. Take the time to ask questions now while you can, and speak well and often of those who have made an impact in your life. This episode with my last remaining grandparent, Joyce Chihas, was recorded in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. Where you came from and where you went. Well, Grandma, I want to hear everything. You're my last grandparent. And I feel pretty lucky to have been able to grow up with so many grandparents. Mm-hmm. I lived most of my life with five grandparents.
That's true.
Yeah. I had something that a lot of people never get, which is, first of all, I had 3 sets of grandparents, and I had relationships with all of you, and I was able to have those relationships into almost all of them into adulthood, which is pretty special. But now you're my last grandparent still here, and what I think is really important is to just know who you are as a person. I've known you as my grandmother my whole life, but there's a lot of life you've lived that I haven't been around for. So I want to know who you are as a person, who you were and made you who you are. Right. But yeah, so your parents, my great-grandparents, who I was also fortunate to know. I knew both of your parents, but again, later in their lives after they had lived so much life. So yeah, tell me about your parents.
Okay. My dad was born when was he born? In 1905.
Okay.
And he was born in Pittston, Pennsylvania. That's a coal mining region near Wilkes-Barre.
Mm-hmm.
His parents came from Italy. And he was the first of 10 children here. There were 9 boys in a row. He was the oldest. And then a girl, my Aunt Mary, whom I was close to for a while. His parents did have a child in Italy, a little girl. I think she might have been married too. And she died. Mm. What she died of, I never found out the reasons. So,
yeah.
And at that time, I wasn't that interested. That's how it goes. That's a shame. It is.
But it's true for all of us.
Yeah.
Really?
We don't think to ask when we could ask.
Yeah.
And find out. So it was important. My life with my dad's family was very important. We always went there on vacations to my grandparents' house in Pittston. But let's get to where my dad met my mom before that. My father went to college in North Jersey. And truly, I remembered, I could have told you the name of the college and the seminary he went to. And I was trying to remember it yesterday. I couldn't remember it. I can't remember it today.
That's okay.
It's in North Jersey near Newark.
Okay.
It's near Newark because that's where he met my mom. He would, from seminary or wherever, I don't know how many years it was that he was going to church in Newark, New Jersey. It was an Italian Presbyterian church.
In Newark.
In Newark. That's where he met my mother. Her family was going there. And so to tell you about my mother, her father was the only grandparent there that I knew. So I knew my father's parents up until after I had gotten married. They were still living. And then my mother's father had died a lot of years before. I think I was in elementary school when he passed, but he could have been her grandfather. Her father. He had been married and his wife had passed away. He went back to Italy and remarried and brought his bride back. And they had my Uncle Eddie, my mother's brother, and then my mom.
Okay.
But he already had, I think, 5 boys. And I knew I was very close to my mother's brothers, Edward, Sal, Uncle Mike. And I know there was another one that I was real close to, and I can't remember right at the moment. But it was nice having my uncles in my life for the time that I did. And we would go and visit them. My mother ended up taking care of her brother Sal in his later years. But anyway, so then my mother met my father in the church. That's who they were. That was her background. Her parents came from Naples in Italy. My father's parents came from right across from Naples on the East Coast, the Abruzzi section. And that's where the Di Toros came from.
What was your mother's family's last
Lanzara.
name?
Lanzara and Di Toro, So anyway, my growing up years with my parents and going to Pittston to visit my grandparents, or that was my father's vacation.
Yep.
Right. And it was fun, though. I had uncles and aunts that didn't live. Only one uncle lived in Pittston. Everybody else was spread out. We were all over the place. But they would come back. So it was always like a family reunion.
That's nice.
In the summertime.
Well, I guess so. With 10 kids.
Yeah.
That's a huge gathering.
Right. And I had cousins. As soon as I would get to Pittston, and I was, well, it probably was maybe when I was in 5th or 6th grade, I started going down the street a block away, and they lived on 333 Parsonage Street was my grandparents.
Wow. That's
house.
Impressive.
Right.
I couldn't tell you your address.
Yeah. And right across from where my Uncle Al lived, my dad's brother next to him, stayed in Pittston. And he lived right across from the Italian Presbyterian church that they went to. And it was called Parsonage Street.
Oh.
Yeah. It's so funny. But anyway, across from my grandparents, it used to scare me because I didn't know what it was all about. There was all this big dirt pile going up, but these were the breakers for the mines. The coal mines were there. It was a big coal mining region. And my father, all his brothers, my grandfather, all worked at the mine, in the mines.
Okay.
You know, as they were growing up and when they needed work, that's where they were working. But when I was little and would get to my grandparents' house, my grandparents didn't speak English. I did not speak Italian. My brother and I could have learned Italian anytime our parents tried to teach us, we weren't interested because nobody was speaking another language.
Sure.
Right. So I'd get to my grandparents' house and kiss everybody hello and run down to my Uncle Al's house because I had 2 girl cousins there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very important. And the other important part of going to Uncle Al and Aunt Ann's house was that they would give Betty Ann, the cousin that was closest to me, she had an older sister, Jean. They'd give Betty Ann money and we'd go down to the ice cream store. So that was a big thing in my life.
Yeah. What was your favorite flavor?
Mm-hmm.
What was your favorite flavor?
At the time, I would get vanilla, but we always got a sundae. But with caramel, I liked caramel. Isn't it funny? Most kids like chocolate.
Mm-hmm. Vanilla
I
and
grew
caramel.
up with caramel, liking caramel. I guess I grew into chocolate later on, but it was a happy time.
Yeah.
It was really nice. And having all the aunts and uncles I did and cousins, we were a close family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's special.
We lived in Burlington, New Jersey. Now, my parents, when they were first married, I know they lived in Newark. That's where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Newark. And I must have been a year old. And I know I was that old when they moved to Neptune, New Jersey, which is near Asbury Park. That's a seashore resort.
Mm-hmm.
And I had pneumonia. I almost died from pneumonia.
Oh, wow.
My mother had a neighbor that was a nurse that came in. And my mother told me this. How would I know? That I had turned black.
Oh, wow.
So it was serious. Of course, I don't remember those days. But I remember growing up a little. I remember a little bit about Neptune. And my brother was born there. But I started school in Neptune. I remember roller skating. I was little, but I was great on roller skates. And what happened to me on roller skates, though, and I was told, the boundaries, so I couldn't go across the street or whatever. But I remember a dog running after me. I was on roller skates.
Oh, my.
And that put an end to my love of dogs because he grabbed a hold of my leg and had his teeth into my leg.
That'll do it.
And I was scared to death. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I was great on roller skates. I remember when my mother took me to school, kindergarten, the first day, I could remember that. Isn't that funny? And I don't remember that address.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you other addresses.
Okay.
I remember a lot of addresses, but that address is the only one I don't remember.
Interesting.
But when we went to kindergarten, there were all these lines of kids outside the school. And I don't remember it being that way with my own children, that they stood in line outside the school before they went in to the first grade or second grade, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember the confusion. I couldn't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was a long time. I was really confused. Anytime I would walk alone to school now, my mother didn't walk me around the corner. I'd get there and I didn't know where I was going.
Yeah.
I knew how to get into the school and go to my classroom, but what line I was supposed to be in.
Yeah, that's scary, especially at 5, 6.
I couldn't understand it. How come other kids could, but I couldn't?
You know what? You're in your memory, you're probably thinking that they knew more than they actually did.
It could be.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then I don't know if I had finished kindergarten when my dad took another church, because he had a church in Neptune, to Burlington, New Jersey. Now, Burlington, New Jersey was from when I was in first grade to 8th grade.
Oh, okay.
So that's a big part of my growing up years, and a lot of different activities and different things going on with me. But I lived at 514 Washington Avenue.
Okay.
In Burlington. from the time I was in first grade to the third grade. And I didn't know this, but well, I knew my dad had next to us was a lot. We were in like duplex, a double house, and next to us was an empty lot. They hadn't built there. They had built there were three duplexes and this empty lot, and then another duplex, and then some other houses on the way up the street. Well, my dad had humongous vegetable gardens. He grew all these vegetables, flowers, everything. But I didn't know that he was renting the house.
Oh.
And what happened one time when we were on vacation, we must have been in Pittston, where else? We came back and we had to move because the man that owned the house sold it to somebody else. And I remember my dad being angry, saying, "Why didn't you ask me? We would have bought it."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But so we had to move, and I had to leave the elementary school I went to. We moved from 514 Washington Avenue. We moved to 227 East Broad Street. Now, when you went up all the way, when I was walking to school from Washington Avenue, I'd have to walk all the way up to the end of Washington Avenue to Broad Street. But Broad Street had the Pennsylvania Railroad going through, and I'd have to cross over every day.
Wow.
The railroad tracks.
As an elementary school student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things that I couldn't understand, but
yeah, looking back.
Anyway, so then that was on 514 Washington Avenue. Then East Broad Street was to the right of where we were. So we were west. And you had to go through town to get to my house from Washington Avenue. I lived around the corner then from the next school that I went to, and that went from kindergarten to sixth grade. And so I went in at fourth grade. And there weren't a whole lot of startling things going on in school.
Did you like going to school?
Yes, I did. I liked it very much. I had some girlfriends, and we were close. We rode bikes. Oh, that was a big thing. You had to ride your bike all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah. We'd even go to the next town. Like, we didn't tell our parents, but we went all over. Right. And
so did you like going to school because of your friends, or did you just like going to school, period?
I liked going to school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was, I guess, a pretty good student.
Yeah.
School was fun. I'm trying to think of, well, I'll tell you what happened when I was in elementary school. The other one, I probably was in second grade when my parents knew that they had a piano in the house, an upright piano. And I would sit down and pick out tunes. I was little. When I was in second grade, they started me on piano lessons.
Okay.
So I was able to take piano lessons. And in Burlington, you had to walk every place. Well, we had to walk every place. And in those days, I don't think there were many parents that had two cars, or my mother didn't drive.
Yeah.
And my father didn't drive us around. My father wasn't always at home. It was a time in our lives when he needed to go work. He worked for my mother's brother 3 days a week. He would drive to Newark. No, where did Uncle Mike lived in Trenton? And Uncle Mike, my mother's brother, worked for the State Department. And my father did payroll for the state of New Jersey.
Oh, wow. See, and I think that's interesting because a lot of people, especially nowadays, I think maybe don't realize that reverends and pastors and ministers had other jobs. That wasn't their, it wasn't their job to just be.
Especially in the Italian churches, they didn't.
They were poor.
Yeah, they were poor.
So, it's pretty incredible that your dad, one of 10, went to seminary. and in the first place, which we'll get back to that because I have questions. But then, he worked in coal mines growing up, and then was doing payroll for the state of New Jersey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did he have? I know he had his seminary education. Did he have? Went to okay. So where did he go to college? Do you know? I'm sure you. I know you know.
I know, but I can't tell you right now. So when I can tell you, I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's just really interesting.
I have, and I don't know where they are right now, but I've had diplomas of my father's.
Oh wow!
So I was wondering what all the diplomas were, and then I realized it had to be college and seminary.
Yeah. Now, did your father's siblings or his brothers
Most of them went to college?
Wow.
In fact, a lot of them and my cousins were following suit. My own brother went to the University of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, so there were 8 boys left, right? Well, the next boy, Albert, he was a policeman. He went to the police academy. And he was a policeman. And then he went to work as a guard in the coal mines.
Oh.
So he had an education. Then I don't know about my Uncle Bill and my Uncle Jack. I don't know what they did.
Mm-hmm.
I know Uncle Bill was up in New York State. And I knew what he did, and I can't remember what it was, but I don't know what education he had.
Yeah.
Same with Uncle Jack. But then my Uncle Vic worked for GE in Schenectady, New York. That was the main place. And he was a draftsman.
Okay.
So he had to have education for that. But I don't know where he went.
Yeah.
But then the 4 youngest ones, Uncle Tony and Uncle Mike, Uncle Larry, and Uncle Pete. Uncle Tony graduated. Those 4 graduated from Alabama, University of Alabama. And I know my Uncle Vic helped the younger boys.
Okay.
When they were at college.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they had jobs or whatever.
Yeah.
That family was that type of a family.
It's just really impressive that, a first generation family in a coal mining town with 10 siblings.
Yes.
And pretty much all of them went to have higher education.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
That's how it was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's impressive.
They were a fun family too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, my Uncle Tony, when the First World War broke out, those 4 boys.
The 4 youngest?
Not Second World War.
Okay. I was going to say
they
were
enlisted.
Okay. For the Second World War.
They already had a tragedy down the line with families sending multiple kids into service.
Mm-hmm.
And one family lost all their kids that had gone in. So when those 4 went in, they weren't allowed to go to the same...
like training camp and same bases.
Uncle Tony was a Marine. Uncle Mike was in the Navy. Uncle Larry was in the Air Force. And Uncle Pete was in the Army.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it was. But Uncle Tony never came back.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's another story. But anyway, those boys were amazing. Uncle Tony and Uncle Mike worked at GE before they had gone into the service with Uncle Vic up in Schenectady, New York. And they were engineers. They were both electrical engineers. Uncle Larry was a chemistry professor at Wilkes College. I remembered that one. And after he married, because he had gone in the service, he met his wife, who was French, but not from France.
Okay.
Africa. West Africa.
Yeah.
And Anne, he brought Anne over. And after he was back, he went back to college. He went in Philadelphia to where all the dentists go. I think it was the Temple University.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of them. And he became a dentist.
Oh, wow.
He was a chemistry professor, but didn't want to stay in that. He became a dentist. He probably made more money.
Probably.
Uncle Pete was a surgeon.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is incredible.
This was my family.
Yeah. Truly. Just
right.
Very impressive. And that none of them stayed in as coal miners.
Oh, no.
But I think that's something that happens a lot, right? Because it's, it's generational. You stay in one place.
They grew up. They knew what they needed. They knew what they wanted.
Yeah.
And my grandparents, were the kind that were very helpful.
Yeah. They encouraged.
They lived in a house this is unbelievable. I loved my grandparents' house. But it was a little bungalow that when the boys got older, it was like the Peterkins. They helped my grandfather. They built a second house.
Yeah.
I remember you walked into a big kitchen and my grandmom's cold stove was there. It was a coal.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Coal stove.
Okay. I was going to have you explain what a cold stove was, but...
Yeah, later on, later on, a lot of years, then she had a regular stove, when the boys could afford to help.
Sure.
And she had a regular stove. But that was that one big room. And this was the original house now, I'm telling you. And off to the right was another room that was their dining room. I don't think there was a living room. There was a great big table in the kitchen, a big round table. Mm-hmm. Then there was a big long table in the other room. And there were 2 bedrooms off of that. And one was my Aunt Mary's bedroom. There were 3 bedrooms. So there was a bigger bedroom. My Aunt Mary's bedroom was a little one. And then my grandparents' bedroom. The other side of the kitchen was a room that they had a refrigerator freezer in there. So who knows what was there before? Mm-hmm. It might have been an ice box.
Sure. Yeah.
And there was like a pantry there. And there was 1 bathroom. This whole place for all these people. And there was
12
a bathroom
people, right?
There. Yeah.
With 10 kids and parents.
And then the back door going to all the fun stuff out the back. Because my grandpa, he had some animals. Yeah. I know there was a cow. I think they milked the cow. My grandfather grew all kinds of veggies. That's where my father learned all that.
Yeah.
And there was a barn. So what all was in the barn, I couldn't remember. As a child, I didn't go in the barn. There were chickens. And out the back, this is going down the back, there was a lot of grassy areas. But at the end of his property was water, a stream or what do you call it? A creek.
Yeah.
But that creek had black water in it. That was from the mines.
Ah. Yeah. Now, did your grandfather work at the mines too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Was that what he mainly did? Or
yeah.
Okay.
That's what he mainly did when he came from Italy. And was there. That
was what was available to him. Yeah.
Right.
Why did your dad want to become why did he want to go to seminary?
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe he told you.
They never told me, but I know they all went to church. When Sunday would come, we'd all go to church.
Sure.
And took up a couple of rows, or all the Toros sitting there, and in the language too. See, he preached in Italian, my father.
Yeah.
So that was another thing growing up. My brother and I told you, we decided we didn't want to learn Italian. Mm-hmm. Well, we'd sit in church, and my father had an Italian preaching and then an English preaching. My father had 2.
Oh, he did both.
Oh, did both.
Okay.
So it wasn't that he just preached in Italian. And it had to be different because there were Italian people that understood English and English-speaking people that understood Italian in the church. So he had to have different sermons all the time. He couldn't give the same one.
Yeah, back to back.
That he gave in Italian in English. He couldn't do that.
And he also had another job, which it's just a lot. It's crazy.
And then he had Thursday night prayer meeting that Paul and I never went to that. That was only in Italian.
Okay.
Yeah. But we did go to we had young people's meetings.
Sure.
And that's when I went to Philadelphia. That's when that
Okay.
started, when I was in high school.
Did a lot of your generation not want to learn Italian, like your peers?
My peers didn't speak Italian either.
Yeah.
So we were all in the same
Yeah.
boat. But the thing is, my father sometimes had to reprimand us because we'd be giggling in the pews. And if my friends were talking, he didn't say, Rose, be quiet. He'd say, Joyce, be quiet. He's calling me.
Even if you weren't doing anything?
Yeah, right. Right. I didn't have to do anything.
So it's your friend.
Right. But I was in the same row that they were in. So
guilty by association.
Joyce from the pulpit, I can't tell you how many times that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that.
It was very interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after 8th grade, you moved to Philadelphia?
Well, let me tell you about my junior high years.
Yeah.
Because I told you I had started taking piano lessons in 2nd grade.
Yes.
And we had to walk everywhere. But anyway, we'd walk halfway across Burlington, which was not a humongous town, but still.
It's more than most people walk nowadays.
But then my mother didn't like the music teacher. She had reason to. And so then I stopped taking from him. And then we had moved to Broad Street. So I was in a different situation. At the time that I was going to school, and I don't know how many years later this took place, but the schools were segregated. Mm-hmm. The Black students weren't in our schools. And I didn't realize that at the time.
Sure.
Until I got to junior high and saw Black kids in my school. Well, even before that, because what happened, I don't know how my parents found out that the principal of the Black school was a music teacher. So she was my piano teacher. She would come to my house.
Oh.
I had to go to this other person's place. Okay. So, and she was wonderful, Mrs. Goodwin.
Good job.
Yeah. And so I took lessons from her for, I'd say, probably 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade for 5 years.
Wow.
From Mrs. Goodwin. But what happened, she did a good job because by the time I was in 6th grade, my girlfriend, Margie Naylor, had decided that she wanted to sing in a PTA meeting. Now, that was a Parent Teachers Association. Mm-hmm. Her mother was president that year. We're in 6th grade. So she wants to sing. So I accompanied her on the piano. She sang Living for Jesus. I had to play Living for Jesus, and she sang that at a PTA. But in those days, that was fine, But I did a lot with piano because when I got to 7th and 8th grade, our junior high was 7th and 8th grade. High school started in 9th grade. Mm-hmm. Well, in 7th grade, they asked me to play for when we went in for an assembly. We had assembly once a week. Okay, so there were many 7th grade. It's not just one. Mm-hmm. I think there were 4 7th grades and 4 8th grades.
Wow.
So when they would walk into the auditorium, they asked me to play the piano. Oh, yes, I was going to play the piano. And I played Anchors Away.
Okay.
I played Anchors Away every time we had an assembly. They probably were sick of it. I played that for...
Here Comes Joyce with Anchors Away.
But nobody said anything to me.
Yeah.
They marched into Anchors Away. But when I was in 8th grade, we always had, and I don't remember having that in 7th grade, we would have a concert, the junior high and the high school. The high school was across the street from us, catty corner from us, and from ninth to 12th grade. And so we practiced a lot of songs for this concert for the we were in eighth grade. So junior high had a chorus that was going to sing, and the senior high had a choir that was going to sing. I don't know who the piano player, I was the piano player for the junior high, of all things. There were music teachers that could have done this, which was an honor.
Yeah.
Where the other, I don't know if it was a teacher or a mother or whatever, but I was asked to play. So I did a lot of nice things.
Yeah.
In my youth.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, music was your thing.
Yeah, music was my thing.
Did you play any sports through your school career?
What was that?
Did you play any sports in school?
No.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, well, I'll have to tell you about the high school years. That's different. But in middle school, I don't think we had sports.
Oh, okay.
We were playing sports.
Yeah.
There weren't any girls playing sports.
Okay.
Else I would have.
Yeah.
Because I was in with the girls,
Yep.
I would have done that. But music, yes. And I was taking flute in my eighth grade.
In eighth grade, you started flute.
Then we get to move to Philadelphia. Now, what happened when my father decided, which was shocking to me, because I had a boyfriend in eighth grade.
Okay.
And now we're going to move to Philadelphia.
Yeah, not close.
No. And I had girlfriends. I thought I had a perfect life, And the principal of the school called my parents in to tell them. Now, this didn't affect my brother. It affected me because I was going to go into high school.
Yeah.
Well, he said there was a high school there that I would have to go and take a test to get into. Like, okay, we moved to South Philadelphia. I could have gone to South Philly High School. But he recommended me going to Philadelphia High School for Girls.
Oh, okay.
It was an academic school. So, and I thought, yeah, that sounds good. I knew nothing about South Philly High School.
Yeah.
I was glad I didn't go there. But anyway, so my father had to drive me in one day and my mother came, of course. Paul was in school. I had to take a 3-hour test at Girls High.
Oh, wow.
To see if I qualified. Now, people living in Philadelphia, the middle school, junior high, would send the transcripts in for the kids, and they didn't have to take a test.
Oh,
if they felt they qualified, they were on the honor roll or whatever, then they could get in. So I went to Girls High.
Did you like it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when I was, what did I know? They had an orchestra. I was new playing the flute. I didn't think I could qualify to go into the orchestra. But when they found out that, oh, you're playing the flute? So, okay, I went and talked to Miss Weir, the music teacher. And I wasn't in orchestra more than, the first year was fine. I went to orchestra, and you went to orchestra as it was a class. So it took the place of something, and I don't know what that took the place of then. But Miss Weir said to me, Joyce, I think you should go to the All-City Orchestra. I didn't know what that was, the All-City Orchestra. Okay, I found out where it was. Well, where I lived on South 10th Street, I had to take a trolley on 11th Street and go all the way up to wherever it was. It was far.
Yeah.
It was another high school. I don't know how many high schools there are in Philadelphia. But when I went to All City Orchestra that night, Miss Weir didn't tell me that you have to try out. I almost died. I was very shy. And I thought, oh my gosh. And there were a lot of boys there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't used to being with a lot of boys my age now.
Yeah.
So I had to try out. I made it, yeah.
Of course.
But I thought that wasn't fair. That wasn't nice. That I probably wouldn't have gone if she told me.
Probably.
Right.
And now you wouldn't be able to tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't have had the experiences I did with All City Orchestra because it was all the high schools in Philadelphia. I don't know how many there are.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And it was all their best, so-called best players, but we did not sound like a high school orchestra.
I'm sure not.
We played at the Academy of Music.
I love that place.
Yeah, many times. And we went other places. We played in Atlantic City at Convention Hall, gave a concert. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember more being on the boardwalk with my friends than I do the actual concert.
Well, I think that tracks.
Yeah. But I did a lot of nice, fun things in high school.
Did you ever think at that point that music would become something more for you?
Yes, because I had intended to go on, to college and continue. That never happened.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys moved to Philly because of my dad's
church.
He
took a church. See, the church in Burlington was part of the big American, we call it the English-speaking church.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a big structure, and you walked through that church. And in that church, I played many times and I was in 6th grade. I played for summer Bible school a lot of times.
Yeah.
Sunday school, summer Bible school, a lot of kids. And at the back of the church, you'd walk into a great big Sunday school room. From there, you'd walk into a kitchen area. From there, you'd walk into the Italian chapel.
Okay.
We were the Italian chapel. Well, see, then going to Philadelphia, my father had his own church, which was one structure. He had his own church. We weren't part of the American church.
Okay. Yeah. So it was really like there was a church and you were a church inside of a church in Burlington. Exactly. And this was strictly...
Even though in that church in Burlington, he still gave 2 sermons, one in English and one in Italian. But then we had our own building. Our house was connected to the church. The manse, it was called, was next to the church.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 4 years from that I lived in that house.
Okay. How long did your dad preach there?
For a while, because after I was married, for several, I'd say maybe about 10 years, and then they moved to Staten Island.
Oh.
And he took a church in Staten Island. And,
okay.
Let's see, I had Jackie, Jill, and Joyce was still a little tot, and we were still going there.
Yeah, before they moved.
Yeah.
And the church in
Staten Island they were going, Jackie, Jill, and Joyce.
Oh, you were going to Staten Island to go to church?
No, we didn't go there to church. We went to visit them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Oh, no.
That's quite a drive for church.
Right.
And so all of the moves that your parents made was for his churches.
Yes.
Which again is really interesting because it wasn't his full-time paying job.
Yeah, but it was once he got to Philadelphia.
Oh, it was in Philadelphia.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I think he was still going when we lived on Broad Street in Burlington. But then once we moved to Philadelphia, he wasn't.
Okay. So that became his full-time job once he moved to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So what was living in South Philly like versus North Jersey?
It was hard.
Was it?
Yeah. Because my schoolmates were all over the city. I didn't have anybody near
around
me
the
in
corner.
South Philly that went to Girls High.
Yeah. Were you able to make friends in your neighborhood?
Well, I had a couple of friends from church and
yeah. So
it was hard living in South Philly.
Yeah.
And The funny thing is, I had to walk. I could either take the 11th Street trolley and go up to Spring Garden Street to get to Girls High, and then take a trolley over to 17th and Spring Garden where the school was. Or I could walk to the subway, which was 5 blocks away.
Yeah.
Which took me to 15th Street and Spring Garden and walked 2 blocks over. So it was different.
Yeah.
Different than living in Burlington, that's for sure.
So I think one of the things that obviously marks your generation is living through World War II.
Yes. I'll tell you, when we were in Burlington, the thing I remember is a couple of times my father took us to Fort Dix. How I remember that, I don't know. That's where the army was or whatever. And sometimes they'd have something going on there, and my father would have to go for a reason. He took us, and then we'd get donuts and coffee and whatever. But across from where we lived, now, I told you the Pennsylvania Railroad went right by our house. After the first year we were on Broad Street, I didn't hear the trains anymore. But even during the night, if a train went by, I never heard it.
Yeah.
Anybody visiting us would say something about the train. We said, what train?
Yeah.
Right.
You're just so used to it.
Right. Exactly. But across from us, there must have been a bus stop, because I remember during the Second World War, there would be a lot of women, girls, dressed up, waiting for the bus to take them to Fort Dix, because they would go to entertain the fellas.
Yeah, the soldiers.
Yeah. Let me tell you something that I found interesting when I was thinking about, my past. My brother was 5 years old. My brother was born in 36. So then in 41, it was his 5th birthday. And we had come home from church, and we were still living in that other house on Washington Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was putting the pot on we always had pasta. We called it macaroni and meatballs, whatever. Mm-hmm. And we would eat in the dining room. We didn't eat in our kitchen very much. And so we're sitting in the dining room. We had eaten, and Mom is clearing the table. I'm 7 years old. And she said, Joyce, I'm going to bring the cake in. Turn the radio on. Let's get some music. So I turned the radio on. And what do we hear? I didn't know what it meant. The Japanese just bombed Pearl Harbor.
His birthday is December 7th?
7th, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I thought I said that. Yeah, his birthday's September. December 7th.
Yeah, December 7th. Wow.
On the 10th. Yeah. And my dad, of course, was very upset. And I didn't know what it meant.
Sure.
I'm 7 years old.
I was going to say, at that point, you're...
Right. So the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. What even that meant, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a memorable day. I'll never forget that day. Yeah.
Did you know that, in your mind as a child, what did it mean to be living through war?
Well, then I found out, when my uncles had to go into the war, mm-hmm. and then my one uncle was killed.
Yeah.
As a Marine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't scary mm-hmm. to me, because to me that was so far away.
Yeah.
Sure. And it had nothing to do with where we were. I know my parents were praying for, people.
Yeah.
But
was it something that you got, was there a lot of messaging around it? Were people constantly talking about it?
No.
Okay.
Although my mother would leave Paul and I alone. I don't know if it was once a week or once a month. She would go to these meetings. She was the head of and I knew what she was the head of. in those days, during that time, the women were meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And what organization? That's sad because I know what she was president at the time, and she would speak at this meeting all the time, but it had to do with whatever they were doing for the war effort.
Mm-hmm. I'm
I'll let you
not
know when I
being
remember.
helpful either, so
I'm sorry, Jen.
don't be sorry.
Yeah.
No, I just think it's really interesting because I lived through 9/11, right? And so I still remember where I was when we heard about 9/11. I was in school. The TVs were on as I was walking into class to, watch the footage live. Mom came and pulled us out of school because dad was working in the city at the time and he got sent home from work and nobody was sure what was really going on. And it, was a bit of chaos. And that was one day. So, for me, and I was a little bit older than you were when Pearl Harbor happened, but just, I can think back and remember exactly what was happening. And I feel like those kinds of events are just very burned into our brains. So, as your generation is the generation that lived through, your generation and the one prior lived through and fought through World War II. And unfortunately, a lot of that is gone. So, I think it's important to talk about not just the people that were over there, but the people that were just living life. Yeah, right. And, what was it like?
Remember?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot.
Yeah. So, but I think that's interesting that it wasn't necessarily a big part of your day to day
growing up.
Yeah.
No. And maybe not as affecting me like 9/11 affected you.
Mm-hmm. So, but your uncles went in, and did they go in voluntarily?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the four of them, they decided because they were all working.
Sure.
Now, I don't know if Uncle Pete was he didn't have his practice yet.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a doctor, but I don't think right at that point he was a surgeon.
Okay.
When he came back.
Yeah.
Then he opened up a practice, but he went and got his surgical, credentials.
Was he a doctor in the?
And
was he in the army?
In Pittston. He opened a practice.
Yeah, but was he a doctor in the military, or did he just go into the infantry?
Yeah, he worked with what is it that they have in the military when you need to go someplace, you go into not a hospital or whatever.
I don't know, but like a clinic, like a on-site. Mm-hmm. So he did work as a doctor.
On site.
Yeah. Okay. I would think they would want to use that skill if,
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of different people were signing up.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know what all my uncles did.
Yeah.
I was a little girl.
Yeah. And it wasn't something that they talked about when they came home.
No.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
You lived through a lot. I mean, you're 90, so
yeah, I
it's a long life. What would you have liked to have gone to school for?
Well, I was going to go in I liked elementary teaching or something with music. I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, but that's what you were hoping for. But it was
going to be something with teaching and
nice.
And kids.
Well, definitely had kids.
Yeah,
so.
Right. Exactly.
6 kids. But I want to fast forward to a time when, a little bit before I was alive, but then I was alive, when you met Opa.
I met Opa in 1985.
Okay, yeah. So just 4 years before Jen. That's how we're marking. Yeah, before me. 4 years before. So how did you guys meet?
Neighbors across from me, and I was still living in Wallingford. No, wait a minute. No, I was in media, living in media when I met him. But they were my neighbors from Wallingford, Bessie and Charlie Adams. He worked with Charlie Adams at the University of Pennsylvania for 30 some years.
Okay.
And they knew him. They knew what had happened with his wife and his family. And they wanted me to meet him. So they had planned a Valentine party. And we had a blizzard that day or right there, and they had to cancel it. So then I met him in March of 85.
Okay.
And I didn't see him. Well, we met. I don't think we even talked too much that night. But he asked Charlie for my phone number.
Okay.
Anyway, we started seeing each other probably the end of June or early July.
Yeah.
And then we knew that we got married in December. So I met him in March and we got married in December.
Yeah. Of 85.
Of 85.
85, yeah. So, I mean, obviously people won't know who Opa is, but right. Opa was my grandfather, your husband.
Right.
You had your kids, and I was born 4 years after you married Opa. So clearly things have moved along in our timeline here.
I didn't know we were married that long when you were born.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember I have more than one I have the one picture on my sink, but I have another picture in your mother's house. Was that your mother's house? I'm not sure. Whatever. I have a couple of pictures of you.
Of me, yes. Well, several.
In Maryland. Yeah.
Well, so Opa was one of my absolute favorite people in the whole world. And I knew him my whole life.
Right.
So as far as I was concerned, he was always my grandfather.
Right.
And I talk about Opa in my first episode, actually, of the podcast.
You do?
I do, yeah. And I'd like to go into his story more, but Opa came over from Hungary.
Yes.
After spending time in a prison over there for being a part of the underground church. And he came over and he worked as a physicist at Penn Medicine. Super. I mean, he just has an incredible life.
Penn Medicine. The University of Pennsylvania.
Sorry, the University of Pennsylvania. I did know that. The University of Pennsylvania. So I would love to talk more about him.
Yes.
And his story and all of that. But I'd love to hear from you, with that small little introduction for people that didn't know him personally. But for you, what was it like being married to somebody like him to, he had gone through a lot, by the time that you had met him, and obviously it affected the way that he lived his life.
He was alone for 7 years before he met me.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't that he was coming from.
No, I didn't think it was right away, but just the idea that this is something that most people have never lived through.
And he wasn't seeing his sons either.
Yeah.
He was going through that.
Yeah. So because he was married prior as well, and that's a whole other story. And yeah, it's sad.
It was very sad. I felt sorry for Laz, but that's how it was. And I was so thankful that he had my children that were interested in him.
Yeah.
The Peterkin family.
Yeah.
Because you're the only ones that were that close to Opa and Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy and I really, we really loved Opa. Still love Opa, but yeah, I mean, I was thankful to have him for as long as we did. But his life is just so incredible.
What he went through is unbelievable.
Yeah, his life is just so incredible, and you wouldn't know those things about him.
But he loved the Lord, and what happened to him in Hungary, It's a good thing he had the intelligence that he did,
Yeah.
because he knew enough to get out of the way of them bringing him back. They let them out of prison, but the next day they went and got them.
Mm.
And a lot of them went back again.
Yeah. Wow.
It was a sad situation.
Yeah. And he was able to get out. How long did you know each other before he told you about his past?
Oh, he told me right away.
Yeah.
I knew about his past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you met, he asked Charlie for your number. Did you like him when you first met?
No. Well, let me put it this way. In a way, I liked him, but I remember him coming over to the house. I lived in Media, and we had coffee and whatever, and talked a lot. And even that first conversation, it was always a Bible study, which was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when he was leaving, and I shut the door, and I'm saying no. I remember that.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
And then he ended up being
He was very special.
Yeah.
Very special. And I think because I loved it. He was genuine. He loved the Lord. And every time he came, it was a Bible study. I remember one time Joyce came over, and my kids all had a key to the house.
Mm-hmm.
So she's coming in the door, and we're sitting in the dining room having a Bible study. So I told her when she walked in, she didn't know that anybody was there.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her, we'll be finished in a little bit. And Laszlo said, well, if you want, you can sit down.
Join the Bible study.
Right.
Yeah, well, he was very welcoming.
Yeah.
Well, so you guys obviously met up in Pennsylvania, but you moved to Florida. And so that's where we spent a lot of time with you when we lived there, but then also Jimmy and I would come back during the summer and stay with you guys.
Right.
And you would take us to Epcot, and, we would swim in your pool, and a lot of fun memories. And Opa never lost his accent.
No.
Which was fabulous. And there are still words that Jimmy and I will say like Opa would say them.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah. And I remember this one time we went to Epcot together, and we had come back to your house, and we're standing in the kitchen eating an Opa meal of cold cuts and like hunks of bread and pickles. And all of a sudden, Opa talks about the Subarus. We left the Subarus. And we're all like, the what? We left the what? He's like, the Subarus. They're in the car. The Subarus. The souvenirs.
Oh, no. The Subarus.
So we still call souvenirs Subarus.
Subarus. That's too funny.
Yeah. So, a lot of fun Opa stories. But I'm thankful that you let Charlie give him your phone number.
Yes.
So that I got to know him too.
That's so funny. I remember him sitting in Charlie's dining room. There was a lot of people in the living room, and I knew all these people. And the night I met him, and when I went in, I was still living across the street. Bessie introduced me to all these people. I thought she was out of her mind, but it was because Laszlo didn't know anybody. She didn't want him to feel that he was the only one that didn't
cute.
know anybody. So she introduced me to everybody I knew.
That's sweet. It's so nice that they got him involved too, because that's a lonely life.
Well, they knew Laszlo a long time.
Okay.
And they knew who his wife was and what she was, and
how difficult that was. I didn't realize it was such a long time before you met him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was alone 7 years.
And he worked at University of Penn. And he had his own lab, right?
He had 2 labs.
He had 2 labs.
Two different labs.
Yeah.
And he worked with the graduate students. So those getting their PhD had to work with him.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And he did a lot. He's in a lot of their books too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have a letter from NASA hanging on your
Yeah, right.
wall
Oh,
thanking
he did
him.
work for NASA too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Just a pretty.
He never bragged about anything.
No, that's what I mean. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know any of this. And that's why I think this is so important to talk about our lives like this, because you just don't know how incredible
you know what I feel
things
bad
are.
about? But it's done. When he passed away, I didn't put it in the newspaper, which I should have done, because we were thinking at the time, well, he doesn't have any family, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, who's going to know? There's a lot of people that knew Laszlo for years. All those years at the university that he worked with all these people, these PhDs, and everybody knew Laszlo Giosh.
Yeah.
That name was very well known. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, he was honored as best we could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was quite a guy. He was absolutely no trouble. The years that he was here, 4 years, he was not well.
Yeah.
And
he's so funny because I just remember anytime he would see Jimmy, my brother Jimmy, he would be like trying to pull him aside to ask him to buy him a cheesesteak. If he would take him for a cheesesteak.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
How old was Jimmy?
Like, well, in his 20s.
Oh.
Yeah. Up here.
Oh, up here.
When you guys moved back up here.
He'd want a cheesesteak?
Oh, yeah. Every time.
I didn't know that.
He would try to get Jimmy alone so that you couldn't hear.
Oh.
And ask Jimmy to take him out for a cheesesteak.
Oh, that poor guy. I didn't know he wanted a cheesesteak. Oh.
So, yeah, we got him his treats as often as we could.
Yeah, he probably wasn't liking whatever I was cooking for him.
Well, and then he would always ask Mom for a beer. When you guys would come over. Yeah, he would, just again, quietly.
Because that wouldn't be over here. Right?
Ask Mom for a beer. Right. And Mom would always give it to him.
Oh, that is too funny. Poor guy.
Oh, he got his treats.
Yeah.
And then he always wanted to feed the dogs.
Oh, really?
Yes. He always wanted to. He always did.
Yeah.
Even when we told him not to. He would feed the dogs.
Anyway.
And you know what? It was okay.
Yeah. That was Opa.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But yeah, I mean, it's going to be 10 years soon.
Will it be 10?
Yeah.
Soon,
not this year.
Okay. We moved here in 2012.
Yep. September of 2012.
Right. And he passed away in 16.
Mm-hmm.
That was 4
December.
years. Yeah, December 14th. That was our anniversary, 31st anniversary.
Yep. So it'll be 10 years next year.
Yeah. And it's 10 years.
Next year.
Yeah,
it's 2025. So next year, it'll be 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because it feels like it happened a couple years ago.
Right. It's true. It has gone so fast.
Yeah. But I think it speaks to his memory that he still feels so close, that he had such a big impact on all of us that it's still so easy to recall him and the way that he lived his life.
Right.
And the impact he had on all of us.
I really miss him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk about your life because, again, I think it's important that, not everybody makes it into the history book. And that largely depends on who you are and where you are and who you know. But that doesn't mean that our stories are unworthy of being told and shared and remembered. And I think people live incredible lives, and just to live is an incredible feat in and of itself. So
thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think of a lot of these things. And I can't believe how many things I forgot.
I can't believe how many things you remember.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I could tell you the layout of my elementary school. And I'm a lot of years younger than you are. So.
And my addresses. And
Yeah.
I didn't give you the address for Philadelphia either.
What is it?
1020 South 10th Street.
All right, I think that's where we end it. Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.